This is Blaisin Access Weekly, candid conversations about the disability experience. I'm Blaise Bryant. We're going to go back in time to some interviews I did way back when I was in college in 2014. The College of St. Rose in Albany, which is where I went to college, was still open then. It unfortunately closed at the end of 2023 due to poor financial mismanagement. But let's start the trip down memory lane. The first part of our show is going to be with someone I still consider a dear friend, Joe Slaninka, who is a multi-sport wheelchair user, playing hockey, baseball, tennis, basketball, and more. Well, we started out by talking about how he got involved with sled hockey.
I've only been playing sled hockey about 5 years. I've played other sports since I was like 19.
Okay.
I started with wheelchair basketball, wheelchair softball, wheelchair tennis, marathon racing, hand cycling, and most recently sled hockey.
Wow, that's really incredible. If you wouldn't mind, explain to us how sled hockey works, and then we'll take a trip into the other sports.
Okay. Sled hockey is actually very similar to the game of stand-up hockey. You have full pads. You're on ice. You're on a sled that's about 3 feet long, and on the bottom of the sled are ice skate blades. And you're probably about 4 or 5 inches off the ice, and you have two hockey sticks that are about 2 feet long. And on the top of the stick, on the shaft, are like little spikes. And you propel yourself like you're skiing. You kind of dig into the ice and you pull along. And the other end of the hockey stick is a regular hockey blade. So you're actually playing hockey, ice hockey, with two sticks. All the rules apply from stand-up hockey to regular hockey, to sled hockey.
So there is checking, and there is that sort of thing as well in sled hockey?
Yes. There's checking. There's, you can even end up in a couple of fights.
Oh, great.
There's, the offside call. There's the icing call. All the penalties apply. The 2-minute penalties apply. You play with the same amount of people on the ice. 3 forwards, 2 defensemen, and a goalie. The face-offs work the same as stand-up hockey also. So
basically the only difference is during regular hockey you are standing, and sled hockey you're sitting in a sled.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And the sled is made to the person that is using it. It's got to fit just right. Okay.
And you mentioned that the sticks that you play with are 2 feet long. How do those compare to the regulation hockey sticks?
Well, they're made of the same material. They're just, shorter and thinner.
Okay.
They're thin enough or thick enough that you can hold them, with both hands and propel yourself. And they're thick enough to be able to take a nice solid shot and not have it break.
Wow. And do you guys have some sort of a supply of sticks in case one breaks?
Oh yeah. They're readily available. We have, as a team, we have enough equipment to outfit everybody, and in case things happen, you have extra stuff.
All right. That's really cool. So, what position do you play?
I usually play right wing.
And is there a particular reason why you play right wing? Is it because you're a right-handed shooter?
Well, I am a right-handed shooter. I have a little bit of speed, and I have enough upper body strength that I can if I need to, I can get in the corner and scuffle a little bit.
So
Thanks for the puck.
that's great. And are the games like in sled hockey, or I'm sorry, in regular hockey, 20 minutes long? 20-minute periods?
We actually play 3 12-minute periods.
Okay. 3 12-minute periods. So how do the shifts differ? Because in the 20-minute games, typically someone is on the ice for about a minute, maybe minute 15 at the very most.
Yeah, that's pretty much what we do too. We're about a minute and a half, at a minute 45 seconds at the most.
I tried reading up on this, and there wasn't a lot of info. How many people are there on the sled hockey teams?
Our roster is typically about 20, 22 people.
So you can rotate all the lines out then?
You tend to rotate. You want to have at least 3 different lines, 2 goalies, and a couple of extra, hands. So we typically have about 20 people on a roster.
That's great. I mentioned earlier on in the introduction that you were down in Florida playing in various tournaments, and you were a part of the Rough Riders team.
The Long Island Rough Riders. Yep, we went down to South Florida in Fort Myers. They host a tournament for about 5 or 6 years now. We've gone about this is our 3rd year going, and this is the 2nd year in a row that we've actually come away with the championship.
Well, congratulations!
Thank you. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a total team effort. Everybody played well.
It must be cool getting to meet different players from all over the country.
It definitely is. Part of the allure of the game is, the traveling and meeting other people, and just kind of networking.
Wow, that's fantastic. I'm really just in awe. Have you been anywhere else?
We actually are going to Ottawa in early April to play in a tournament. Because we did so well in Florida, we've decided to move on to a little tougher competition in Ottawa.
Well, that's great. And what about this competition makes it tougher?
Number one, it's in Canada. Hockey was born and bred in Canada, so they take their hockey very, very seriously. So the teams up there are definitely tougher competition.
That's phenomenal. We'll get back to sled hockey in a few minutes, but you also mentioned that you play wheelchair basketball, softball. You do marathon running and a couple other sports. So,
right.
How do those work?
Wheelchair basketball is played on the court. Regulation basketball court. We play. Basketball plays NCAA rules. So they play 2 20-minute periods. You have 5 guys on the court at one time, 2 forwards, 2 guards, and a center. It's a 10-foot basket. You have to dribble. The dribbling rule, for every 2 pushes of the wheelchair, you have to put the ball on the floor at least once. Chair-to-chair contact is considered a foul. There's a lot of pick and rolls, a lot of screens, zone defenses, motion offenses.
Wow.
It's a fast game.
I'd love to go check out a game sometime. And
it's a lot of fun.
I know several years ago you and I, because we go way back, and I'm so glad that we do, you and I were talking about wheelchair marathon running, and I will never forget when you were telling me about how you have the different grips on the chair and all that, and just how incredible that is.
Yeah, the marathon chair is very different than any other chair that we use for basketball or softball. It's got 3 wheels. It's lower to the ground. It's more aerodynamic, and it's a different kind of push. And it's tough. It's very tough, because it's a smaller style chair, so you're kind of squeezed in there a little bit. And you're lower to the ground, so a lot of people don't really see you too well,
I see. And how many marathons have you done?
Oh, I've done a bunch. I've done the New York City and the Long Island probably about 5 times each.
Wow. Have you ever thought about doing the Boston Marathon?
I tried. I haven't been able to qualify for that one yet.
Well, I know, just keep on keeping on and you'll do great. I just have a couple minutes left here, but let's quickly talk about how wheelchair tennis and wheelchair softball works, because let's face it, we all need some sort of psychological thing to make us think it's spring.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, tennis is very similar to the stand-up game. The only rule differences between the stand-up game and the wheelchair game is, in the wheelchair game, you get 2 bounces to be able to hit the ball. You can hit it, on the fly. You can hit it after the first bounce, but if you need to, you get that second bounce before you have to return it. You can play singles, you can play doubles, just like stand-up. It's played on a regulation court. All the rules apply.
Wow.
You just get, that second bounce if you need to.
Okay, and wheelchair softball, I would imagine that's relatively similar as well?
Yes, again, it's similar. We play that on a hard court surface as opposed to grass and dirt. We play with 10 players on the field at once. We have a 4th outfielder, a short outfielder that plays between second base and center field. And all the bases are covered, catcher, pitcher. It's slow, underhand, high arc pitching.
Wow.
And we use aluminum bats.
Okay. Wow, that's really incredible.
The ball is a little bit larger than a regulation and softer. It's a little bit larger and softer than a regular softball. We do not use gloves or mitts. So when we catch, we're catching barehanded. Just because it's pretty tough to push a wheelchair wearing a baseball glove.
Joe Slonica, it's really been a delight to speak with you, as it always is, and I look forward to catching up with you hopefully in a few months down at Camp Abilities, Long Island.
Yeah, I can't wait, dude.
Joe Slonica, who is very involved with the Spina Bifida Association of New York State. I had the pleasure of seeing him a couple of months ago. And if you were wondering, did we ever get to catch up at Camp Abilities, Long Island way back when? Yes, we did. Oh, good times. Good times. Back in my 20s and pretty darn carefree. Just really cool to go back and reminisce. Now, before we get to part 2, I do website accessibility consulting. Because let's face it, accessibility, more specifically in the digital space, we generally do a very bad job of it. I want to do my part to help out. So, if you have social media or websites you want me to take a look at, get in touch, blaisinshows@gmail.com, BLAISIN shows@gmail.com. Better yet, I actually have a form that you can fill out. I'll link that in the show notes. So you don't even need to do that, or you certainly are welcome to send me a note and I'll look at it and respond to you. So either way, let's help move that needle of digital accessibility forward. Now to part 2 of the show, where I spoke with John Evans, a writer and poet who is blind. Naturally, my first question was, how did you get involved and what made you want to start writing in the first place?
Well, it actually all started with a particular author. Strangely enough, for a poet, I actually began reading a lot of fantasy prose, starting with J.R.R. Tolkien. I lost my eyesight at 5.5 to optic nerve atrophy. And one of the last movies I saw in something close to 20/20 vision was one of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And that actually sent me on a whole spiraling desire to read the roots of what made the Lord of the Rings trilogy and Tolkien's mythos. So after reading Beowulf and looking into a lot of medieval lit, I began working on my first book at a fairly young age and continued working on the mythology until it grew too big, and I began then working on more realistic fiction.
So basically, you worked on a project until it got too big, and then you moved on to something else?
Yes. What's very fascinating about my progression as a writer is when I began metaphorically putting pen to paper, I was trying initially to rival almost The Lord of the Rings in its size and scope. But after a while, after reaching almost 3,000 pages of notes and appendices, I realized that the material would be unpublished. It would be unpublishable. I just wouldn't go anywhere. So then I began working on the book which is now published, All the Best Things. All the Best Things chronicles a highly fictionalized account of my time in the city playing as a folk musician. And between the time my interest in creating a mythology waned and I began working on this book, I was working on a lot of Bob Dylan covers and a lot of new music in that line of thought. So I thought, why not combine my literary interests with trying to tell a Great Gatsby story with rock and roll? And it seems to have worked out very well.
I'm laughing because the parallels are not something anyone would exactly think of. And I think it's really interesting that here you were writing fiction, and then you start doing covers of someone who, in terms of music-wise, there was probably no person, no musician that told things in a more truthful way than Dylan.
Definitely. I would say, especially with Dylan, it's because Dylan is a poet. He draws from William Blake exceedingly. I think
How do you know that?
This is where, he draws from William Blake and a lot of poetry around the turn of the century. And he's been compared to many poets in the past. Whether his lines are truly poetic is debatable. I think they are. But the one thing which struck me early on, and I think this is where my thought process went, I can't write the freaking Lord of the Rings. It's been done before. Hell, they threw dragons in it and made freaking Aragon. So what I should do is, write the next great American novel. Well, what's the one thing which has impacted, the better part of the 20th century and has influenced the 21st century? Oh, rock and roll. Okay, so what's a great American novel? Gatsby. Oh, that's cool. Who's my favorite artist in the music genre? That'd be Dylan. I put the two together, and out of this really wacky and rather absurd parallel, I began working on the manuscripts, which became the book which we have today. And after going through innumerable rewrites, and I could probably give an entire show dedicated to just rewriting that one text. It finally reached publication on Lulu.com about this past December. But as you can tell, I went from basically borderline Victorian prose to a very trimmed down, almost Hemingway novel, now to poetry. So it's a very interesting progression.
And how did you develop a fascination for all those things?
Well, I would say with Dylan, with poetry in particular, I really wanted Well, starting with Dylan, I was up in Newton, Massachusetts, just hanging around with a lot of my family friends who live in a little town called Boxford, not far away. And there's a small little record shop. It's a very dingy old building, smelling of, basically weed and lots of smoke.
And there you go. So it's relaxing then.
Yeah, very relaxing. Very, it's a great environment, man. I would recommend it for anybody. You go in there, and you have the most stereotypical, deadbeat crowd of emaciated figures by this small desk. I don't even remember the name of this place. I should look it up because it was significant. Because there in a corner was a pile of Dylan vinyl and a pile of Dylan CDs, and it had this cute little sign over it which said basically, "We're throwing out this dump. Take what you want, pay what you want." And as nobody was looking, me and a few of my cousins at the time just grabbed a handful and walked out.
There you go.
Thus began my illustrious time looking into Dylan. And the first CD I had, it ended with a particular song, which is All Along the Watchtower, the original All Along the Watchtower. And its verses, there must be some kind of way out of here, said the joker to the thief. There is too much confusion, and I can't get no relief. Those lines, the joker and the thief, man, that's almost medieval poetry right there.
Yeah.
That's an interesting compare. And then All Along the Watchtower, princes kept the view, while their women came and went, and their barefoot servants too. That struck me as, oh my God, that's something Tolkien might have written. So one song, really, that particular song, drew the parallel, which made me look into performing folk music, ironically, through that one little encounter. And what ended up taking place afterwards is I became obsessed with everything associated with All Along the Watchtower, but particularly with basically the John Wesley Harding album that Dylan did, and the freewheeling Bob Dylan. And that, of course, inspired my band, Wrecked Haven. But the band was really an outlet, really, for my poetry, which I began writing. I initially wrote Dylan-esque poetry. That's another thing, too. Dylan's name really is Robert Allen Zimmerman, but he takes his name from the poet Dylan Thomas.
And Bob Dylan grew up in Minnesota, too.
Exactly. And what ended up happening as a result of that, basically, then I read Dylan Thomas, and I said, how about I take some of the same imagery and write deep folk songs? So really, the songs never took off, but the lyrics, people loved quoting them after walking out of, a few bars in New York City and some bars down at the river towns, like Hastings on the Hudson, that whole area. I thought to myself, after working on this book, All the Best Things, well, I have this cache of, as of yet, unused song lyrics, which I've been dallying with for over 3 or 4 years, I might as well apply them in a way which can actually reach people, and in a far deeper context, not necessarily in a song that someone would hear in 3 minutes, but in something somebody might read in an almanac, a dusty old red, leather-bound book, which you would have on a shelf, above your fireplace. And that image, that kind of homely image, really caught me and captivated me until I began expanding my poetry and weaving my love of folk music, of the poetry of none other than Bob Dylan, and the medieval landscape which Tolkien inhabited and which he loved to evoke through his writing. So the poetry was my amalgamation between two completely different worlds, seemingly isolated from one another by a vast area of time, and I was able to take that power and kind of milk it into this rather strange and rather interesting manuscripts which has become Inside the Midnight Veil, the latest booklet, which should be published this week.
Wow, that's fascinating. How did you deal with putting all this together? I'm talking the Midnight Veil, and being a college student at the same time?
That has always been a struggle. I mean, I know this past week between midterms, I'm a commuter right now, so that means I'm living at home, working on my pieces, and of course I'll have my mother be screaming up to me, "John, dinner's on the table, get your stuff." I'm like, oh God, you know, it's like, come on, no, Mom, I'm working on a poem. Jeez, no, come down, soup. I'm like, no, but this poem is great. Who cares about poem? But at the end of the day, there's a lot of hope, because unlike writing a freaking novel, right? Unlike sitting down and writing a book, which takes hours and hours and hours and hours of careful thinking and plotting, a poem, you can go back and scrap all together and write again and again and again in a very short, compact, and beautiful amount of time. And because of that, right, we are able to go back from our own experiences throughout the day, working on homework, working on, all the pressure we have built up, and translate it into something which is small, which you can easily fit into your pocket, into a scrap of paper. So it is an interesting process, but I can say my poetry has become the ultimate expression, not only of my writing, but of who I am and all the thoughts I'm wanting to represent.
You said you're a folk singer. I have to cut you short there a little bit because time is short, and, well, so am I. What instruments do you play as a folk singer? Well,
I am predominantly a lyricist and the singer, but I also play harmonica.
Cool.
And that's a whole story how I got into that. But
like Dylan.
To make a long story, yeah, Dylan. And the advice of a few people said you should take it up, because I can't play guitar. I can play basic chords, but I'm basically reliant on other guitarists to translate what I do on piano, because I'm a pianist. And basically, I'll initially write a song on the piano and set my poetry to the piano, and from there have somebody else translate to guitar for live performance.
That's great. So where is The Midnight Veil going to be published so that people can take a look at it?
Inside the Midnight Veil should be published on lulu.com, LULU.com, probably by next Wednesday. Can't keep track of any of the dates at the moment.
We're all at that point.
By the latest. And it should be amazing. Right now we're just working on the cover art to make it as poignant as possible through a few friends of mine. And, we hope it can reach many audiences.
John Evans is a writer. He is a musician. His latest work, Inside the Midnight Veil, will be published on lulu.com, LULU.com, later next week. John, we will talk soon. Thanks so much for being a part of the show. I very much appreciate it.
Same here, man. It was fantastic.
A delight.
All the best.
It's John Evans from 2014, and the interview with Joe Sonika was right around this time of year in 2014. So really cool trips down memory lane. I admittedly have lost touch with John Evans, so if you're listening and you know John, tell him I said hi, and it'd be great to reconnect again. What did you think of this show? Let me know on Facebook at Blaisin Shows. That's BLAISIN Shows. Make sure you rate, review, subscribe, and share the Blaisin Access podcast. That helps it grow. Transcripts are AI generated and are not perfect, but they will give you a baseline sense as to what I'm talking about here on the show. Next week, we're going to have a really awesome conversation about all the crap that's happening federally, some of the advocacy that's happening in New York, the overlap, and much more. Stay tuned. Then, and in between, I'll catch you on the daily on the Blaisin Access podcast, the daily version. I'm so grateful for you listening, and be well, be safe, be kind. Especially be kind. My goodness. I'm Blaise Bryant. Thank you for listening to Blaisin Access Weekly, candid conversations about the disability experience. Have a great day.